Hey guys, it's Dave coming to you from the paddock here in Southern Maryland. This is video number 3 for the day. I want to keep going. I don't want to get too far behind on reading the American Cause. We're still in chapter 5. We're doing the second half of chapter 5. It was just taking too much time. I wanted to stop, so we stopped. We stopped right in the middle, and we're now reading from Order and Classless Society. Order means that there must be a recognition of different functions and ability amongst the members of society. In any age, it is the nature of things that the few must lead and the many follow. They endeavored to ensure that the American Republic might choose its leaders wisely and that those leaders' power might be hedged and bounded by wise constitutions and counterbalancing influences. So, the argument of this part of the chapter is that this concept of everybody's equal in every way and should participate in society in the same way and get the same share of everything is this mythical beast that doesn't exist, and that there are in fact most people are going to be followers and a few are going to be leaders. But I thought this was critical. They endeavored to ensure that the American Republic might choose its leaders wisely, and I'm not sure we're doing that anymore. And it goes on to say, and that those leaders' power might be hedged and bounded. So even those that we elect in power, the power has to be hedged and bounded by wise constitutions and counterbalancing influences. These statesmen of the early years of our country never meant to establish a classless society. The classless society is the dream of Karl Marx and other 19th century socialists. Classes always had existed in all lands. The Republic's founders reasoned, and classes are a social product of man's nature. There were many classes of their own in America, and they expected that there always would be. Fishermen, farmers, manual laborers, merchants, artisans, bankers, professional people, clergymen, landed proprietors, teachers, servants, soldiers, sailors, clerks, political administrators, shopkeepers, and yet more orders in society, most of them with a useful and inescapable function, and all of them probably destined to endure as distinct elements in a nation to the end of time. There was nothing immoral or obsolete about the existence of class, they felt. Class was natural in society as the separate functions of the brain, the heart, and the lungs in the human body. I thought that was a great way to say it. There was nothing immoral or obsolete about the existence of class. Class was as natural in society as the separate functions of the brain, the heart, and the lungs in the human body. You go on and define aristocracy. So they did not aspire to abolish class. What they disliked was not class, but caste. What they disliked was not class, but caste. Distinction and privileges enforced by law. An aristocrat, in other words, is a natural leader, qualified by intelligence, charm, strength, cleverness, industry, wealth, family, education, or some other resource to influence the opinions of his neighbors. A satisfactorily orderly society, they argued, must consist of a mixture of aristocracy and democracy, a balancing and checking and harmonizing of the influence of wealth and private ability with the influence of numbers and popular desire. Oh, that was great. A satisfactorily orderly society, they argued, must consist of a mixture of aristocracy and democracy, a balancing and checking and harmonizing of the influence of wealth and private ability with the influence of numbers and popular desire. They wrote into the federal constitution and the state constitutions safeguards against both the power of the wealth and the power of needy majorities, against the ambition of gifted men and the appetite of average men. They feared the lust for power of the strong man, and they feared the lust for possessions of the poor man. Again, this book talks about things both ways, and we don't hear about that anymore. We don't hear about um, rights and then duties. We don't hear about rich and poor having both good and bad aspects. They feared the lust for power of the strong man. And we hear about that all the time, right? We fear the lust for power. But they go on to say, and they feared the lust for possessions of the poor man. We've got to have both. And we've lost that balance, I think, in today's society. And that's why I like this book so much. So the founders of the Republic devised a system of constitutional laws that would protect decent social order from either the autocrat or the mob. Again, see both sides, protecting it from the autocrat and the mob. And right now, I think we have mob rule right now. They would protect decent social order from either the autocrat or the mob. That would balance the interests of authority of one interest or class in state and nation against other interests and classes, that would provide a democratically based society with a soundly aristocratic leadership. Without order, there is no living together in society. So the authors of the American political system had learned from the English political philosophers and from their own century and a half of experience in the New World. Without order, there is no living together in society. So the authors of the American political system had learned from the English political philosophers and from their own century and a half of experience in the New World. The leaders of the new American Republic knew very well what they meant when they used the word freedom. They thought it no paradox that true freedom is obedience to the laws of God. Legitimate freedom, they said, is the right of decent men governed by conscience to make their own principled choices in life. Freedom, defined in the negative, is security against having things done to you that you do not wish to have done to you. By what is called a salutary neglect, the English government generally had left the colonists to manage their own affairs in nearly everything, and thus the 13 American colonies had grown accustomed to freedom in the conduct of their local concerns and their private lives. Only when the ministers of George III began to assert the absolute and abstract right of king and parliament to make laws for the Americans did the desire for American independence begin to make itself felt. The Americans no longer felt secure that things could be done to them of which they might not approve. In short, they ceased to feel free, and having been long familiar with freedom, they were willing to risk death for the sake of keeping up that intimacy. The Americans no longer felt secure that things would not be done to them of which they might not approve. In short, they ceased to feel free. And having been long familiar with freedom, they were willing to risk death for the sake of keeping up their intimacy. In the Bill of Rights, the 10 Amendments appended to the Constitution in the first years of the Republic, the American people set down a few definite liberties, which expressed precisely what they meant by political freedom. They did not mean by freedom the absolute right to do whatever we please, regardless of our religion, our duties, and our neighbors. They did not mean by freedom the absolute right to do whatever we please. But that was good. They meant very differently certain old and valuable securities against having things done to them by the state or by powerful men, which they would not relish having done to them. Freedom from interference with religious opinion and worship, freedom from arbitrary arrest, freedom from having troops quartered in one's house, freedom from cruel and unusual punishments, freedom from arbitrary censorship of the press and speech, freedom from taxation without representation. They did not ask for liberation from moral obligations. They did not ask for liberation from moral obligations, or from paying rents and debts and taxes, or from the jurisdiction of the courts. Again, let's talk about what they didn't ask for. They did not ask for liberation from moral obligations or from paying rents and debts and taxes or from the jurisdiction of the courts. They did not ask for freedoms that no political power possibly can guarantee, like freedom from fear or freedom from want. They asked only for the possible, the maintenance or restoration of certain traditional rights of Englishmen and Americans. Freedom, they knew, is not a possession with some price which some prince or presidents can confer upon men as a gift, not true freedom. Real freedom must be created by individuals and communities. All that central political authority can accomplish is to promise not to abridge the freedoms which men have made for themselves or which they receive as part of their birthright from God. It's pretty powerful. This section is called Unrestrained Liberty. The founders of the Republic put no trust in absolute, unqualified liberty. Unrestrained liberty they thought as dangerous as unrestrained power. Christian liberty and rightful civil freedoms must be balanced and bounded by the safeguards of conscience, custom, good order, and good constitutions. I like that. They weren't looking for absolute liberty. The founders of the Republic put no trust in absolute, unqualified liberty. Unrestrained liberty they thought as dangerous as unrestrained power. Christian liberty and rightful civil freedoms must be balanced and bounded by the safeguards of conscience, custom, good order, and good constitutions. But that was pretty good. Most intelligent Americans today agree that if one begins with unlimited freedom, he will end with unlimited despotism. The American cause is not the cause of a revolutionary thirst for demolishing all obstacles to anarchic self-gratification. When modern Americans, like 18th century Americans, use the word freedom, they mean freedom under law, freedom justified by many years of national experience, freedom under God. Men of intemperate minds never can be free. American freedom has been the liberty of temperate policies and temperate intellects. American freedom has been the liberty of temperate policies and temperate intellects. Justice and order and freedom, the true polity, the really successful commonwealth emphasizes equally all three of these. Now and then in the United States, in the history of the United States, we have erred by neglecting one of these principles at some particular moment, or by overemphasizing another on a different occasion. Yet, taken all in all, with concepts of the founders of the Republic have endured with a strength and consistency most rare in the course of national destinies. And this is how it ends. When we hear a little failure of justice in Georgia or that little neglect of freedom in New York, bewailed and denounced out of all proportion by critics of American institutions at home or abroad, we have the right to appeal to the perspective of history. Historically judged, the American Republic has maintained a balance of justice and order and freedom for well over 2 centuries, which many nations have not been able to maintain as successfully for even a single year in the whole record of their affairs. Thought that was good. There's lots of little quibbles and problems and gripes, but overall, for 200 years, we've done things pretty well right. Nearly all Americans, on nearly all occasions, can rely, if the necessity arises, upon obtaining impartial justice from the courts, upon being wholly secure in their persons and property through the solidity of American order, upon doing any reasonable thing they like without reprimand. The same could not be said for the glory that was Greece or the grandeur that was Rome. Nearly all Americans on nearly all occasions can rely, if the necessity arises, upon obtaining impartial justice from the courts, upon being wholly secure in their persons and property through the solidity of American order, upon doing any reasonable thing they like without reprimand. I thought that was a great way to end the chapter. It's a great way to end this video, guys. We'll be on to chapter 6 tomorrow. Bye, everybody.